0, maintain 5,000, still 1,000, localized, cleared ILS, runway 16 for approach.
On January 15th, a man landed at the Seattle airport.
He was in his 30s, no pre-existing medical problems. He traveled to visit family in Wuhan, China.
He took a rideshare car home from the airport, and right away, the next day, he started feeling sick.
After a few days of feeling poorly at home, he came to one of our clinics. He basically said, I've recently traveled to Wuhan, I've got a cough and a fever, and I'm concerned I might have coronavirus. They contacted the local health officer who recommended testing. They also involved the CDC to run the case through them. At that point,
we were not allowed to test at state public health, and local public health departments were not able to test either. So if we wanted a patient tested, we had to first receive approval or clearance from the CDC. We had to make a case that the patient met their very strict criteria.
So patient 0, his sample had to be flown overnight to the CDC lab in Atlanta, and he was told to quarantine. He was sent home.
It was a big surprise when we got the call.
The test was positive. It was January 20th. Patient 0 had been identified, and now officially COVID-19 was on American soil.
President Trump is at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he answers for the first time on whether he's worried about the growing pandemic in China.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
I never thought it would be just fine, because I didn't think we were doing what was necessary to make it just fine.
The administration were still saying this was a problem overseas.
This is a serious health situation in China, but I want to emphasize that the risk to the American public currently is low.
I think in January and February, there was a sense that we still had this under control.
January was really our opportunity as a country to contain this virus before it spread like wildfire. And that opportunity was missed.
At this point, COVID-19 is on American shores. The question is, was there a plan for the federal government to deal with the pandemic? And it turns out that successive administrations previously had already laid the groundwork for pandemic response.
You know, President Bush deserves a lot of credit for what he did in 2005.
In August 2005, President Bush goes to Crawford, Texas, to his ranch for what is supposed to be a long vacation. And he reads a book about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic by John Barry, and it freaks him out.
Sometime prior to the spring of 1918, an animal virus killed between 50 and 100 million people.
And he sees Barry talking about how these pandemics happen every 100 years or so. You have something massive like this. And he's looking at the calendar.
We'll hear all of it soon.
President Bush knows, personal experience, things he did not anticipate can happen and can cause severe damage and kill a lot of people. 9/11, Katrina, could the next big one be a global pandemic?
By then, we'd already had the SARS experience, and then so-called bird flu, which was pretty scary. That's a pretty good reason to get your attention.
He challenged us to come up with a government-wide, national, not just federal government, strategy for dealing with it should it happen.
The President of the United States.
They get Congress to appropriate money, real money, $7 billion behind this plan.
If we wait for a pandemic to appear, it will be too late to prepare. One day, many lives could be needlessly lost because we failed to act today.
So there was a robust national response. As with all outbreaks, we got the periodic increase in interest in public health, infectious diseases, health security, and then eventually interest would wane, and then you see a decrease in funds. So it's a usual bust and boom cycle for public health, unfortunately.
Tonight, outbreak, a new and deadly strain of flu.
The Obama administration has to deal with an outbreak almost immediately after Obama becomes president.
Every American should know that their entire government is taking the utmost precautions and preparations.
It's dealt with pretty quickly, and he goes back to the cycle of complacency. There are other problems that are more pressing. But 5 years later, 2014, Ebola.
An outbreak of a disease so fierce, so deadly, even the word strikes terror.
This scares the hell out of everybody.
President Obama and Vice President Biden authorized an unprecedented whole-of-government response to the Ebola crisis. And the good news is we're starting to see some results.
When I was winding up my work on Ebola, I met with the president and said to him, we need to build a permanent structure at the White House.
The funding we're asking for is needed to prevent and deal with future outbreaks and threats before they become epidemics.
And he set up a pandemic prevention office in the National Security Council to get us ready for that more deadly, more dangerous, more rapidly spreading epidemic that was going to come to this country someday.
Donald Trump takes office. He has some people in his national security apparatus who served under President Bush, who see this also as a significant issue.
More turnover in this White House than any other administration in recent history.
The challenge is when you have had as many turnovers in this administration, a lot of that work that would have been done during the transition has been lost.
But eventually President Trump's third national security advisor, John Bolton, decides to do away with the section of the National Security Council that specifically deals with pandemics. Just eliminates it.
Now, the Trump administration says they were just streamlining the National Security Council and that some of those staffers were reassigned but continued to work on the issue of pandemic preparedness.
It's not like the government stops worrying about a global pandemic, but make no mistake, at this point, this is not a major priority in the Trump administration.
One thing that the Obama administration left was a pandemic playbook. And on page 9 of the pandemic playbook, it said, hey, here's something to worry about, a coronavirus. I don't know if the Trump administration didn't pay attention to the playbook. I don't know if they didn't read it. What we do know is they didn't run the plays in that playbook. It would have made a big difference if they had.
It amazes me when I read the things that I read. It amazes me when I read the Wall Street Journal, which is always so negative. It amazes me when I read the New York Times. Is not even, I barely read it. You know, we don't distribute it in the White House anymore, and the same thing with the Washington Post. Because, you see, I know the truth. And people out there in the world, they really don't know the truth. They don't know what it is. I know the truth. And people out there, they don't know what it is.
The woman that you said was a great doctor in that video that you retweeted last night said that masks don't work and there is a cure for COVID-19, both of which health experts say is not true. She's also made videos saying that doctors make medicine using DNA from aliens and that they're trying to create a vaccine to make you immune from becoming religious.
Well, maybe it's the same, maybe it's not, but I can tell you this. She was on air along with many other doctors. They were big fans of hydroxychloroquine, and I thought she was very impressive in the sense that from where she came, I don't know which country she comes from, but she said that she's had tremendous success with hundreds of different patients, and I thought her voice was an important voice, but I know nothing about her.
Masks don't work.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Last week you said masks. Last week, look real quick. Last week you said
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, nothing. Just the President of the United States refusing to disavow a so-called doctor who claims that medicine is made from alien DNA. Yep, that's a sentence in 2020. So here's what happened. Trump retweeted a video of a bunch of discredited people who claim that masks don't work and that hydroxychloroquine is the solution to all of our problems and that Dr. Fauci is the enemy in all of this. First of all, they present themselves as doctors, but in reality, they're members of a group called America's Frontline Doctors, and they took part in an event organized by Tea Party Patriots Action, a dark money group that has helped fund a pro-Trump political action committee. One of the doctors is a woman from Houston who's claimed that gynecological problems like cysts and endometriosis are caused by people having sex in their dreams with demons and witches. She claims that scientists are cooking up a vaccine to prevent people from being religious. She claims that government is run by reptilians, and as Caitlin Collins mentioned, she alleges that alien DNA is currently used in medical treatments. Yup, just your everyday general practitioners. And why does Trump like them? Because they're promoting hydroxychloroquine, the same drug that Trump pinned his fortunes on becoming the next miracle cure. He didn't bother to do any of the other work to contain the spread of the virus, but he did stand up at the lectern on a daily basis and promote this drug, basically putting all of his eggs in this basket. And so when it was proven that hydroxychloroquine actually isn't effective, proven in studies from the US National Institutes of Health, the World Health Organization, and universities in the US and around the world, and in fact was actually causing cardiac problems, well then suddenly Trump has nothing. And so instead of pivoting away from hydroxychloroquine, because Trump is physically incapable of admitting fault, still he's promoting it, and he's looking for anyone to back him up, even if the only people willing to do it have strong positions regarding alien DNA. Another element of this is that the videos retweeted by Trump attack Dr. Fauci, and Trump himself has been critical of the nation's premier epidemiologist because he wasn't willing to compromise his medical advice in deference to Trump's own political future. He wasn't on board with Trump's attacks on mask wearing and stay-at-home orders and his decision to hold rallies, and the fact that he wasn't willing to bend the knee, but rather continued to speak the truth, only infuriated a president whose sole concern is absolute loyalty from government officials. And so, of course, he's happily going to retweet attacks on Dr. Fauci. By the way, he thinks that by virtue of retweeting and not tweeting himself, that it doesn't count. Like we won't notice that he didn't outright attack Fauci, but instead just retweeted a bunch of other people who did. This way he can just claim that he didn't read what he was retweeting to 90 million people. That might work on Eric, but not the rest of us. In reality, the easiest way to tell that Trump doesn't like Dr. Fauci is because he complains that Fauci's approval ratings are higher than his, which is the ultimate death knell in this administration.
He's got a very good approval rating, and I like that. It's good. Because remember, he's working for this administration. He's working with us, John. We could have gotten other people. We could have gotten somebody else. It didn't have to be Dr. Fauci. He's working with our administration, and for the most part, we've done pretty much what he and others, Dr. Birx and others who are terrific, recommended. And he's got this high approval rating, so why don't I have a high approval rating with respect, and the administration with respect to the virus? We should have a very high.
Because remember, it's not about your health or your safety, it's about Trump's approval ratings and Trump's re-election. The simple truth is that Trump shows the American people on a daily basis the extent to which he is unfit for the job, and especially at this moment in time. This is a guy who's willing to promote insane conspiracy theories just because they lend themselves to his ego trip. It doesn't matter that 150,000 Americans have died because Trump's only priority is himself. He won't change, he won't evolve. The only way to ensure that you and your family and your friends are safe amid this pandemic is to vote this president out of office and elect someone actually capable of caring about the American people.